Welcome everyone to our ongoing series of classes on the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, the 7 universal Noachite commandments. In today's class, we will be studying a particular section in the laws of Shabbos that pertain to non-Jews. It's actually a Beiur Halachah written by the author of the Mishnah Berurah, otherwise known as the Orach Chaim, who was Rabbi Yisrael Beiur Halachah Kagan, one generation ago. And in the previous class, we actually began this Beiur Halachah, but we will start it from the beginning today. However, sort of by way of introduction, I would like, for the first few minutes, to share with you a couple of rulings of the Rambam of Maimonides, which don't per se relate to this subject, but they do as far as having a bit of an understanding of what a Ger Toshav is and what an Eved Knani is. Although we've discussed this in previous classes in great length, I do want to share with you. This is from the Rambam in the book of Nezikin, of damages, in the laws of Reitzeach Ushmiras Nefesh, of murder and guarding life. So first, in chapter 2, Halacha Yud, law number 10. This is talking about the concept of the prohibition for a Jew to commit murder, to kill. And then we get into the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, which only applied when all of the Jewish people lived in the land of Israel, basically in the times of the Holy Temple, especially in the first temple, I should say. And there were 6 cities designated for this purpose. 3 of them originally were designated by Moshe Rabbeinu, by Moses, on the eastern side of the Jordan River, before the Jewish people even crossed the river and went into the Holy Land proper. So 3 cities were designated by Moshe. And then, after the Jewish people entered the land, led by Yehoshua bin Nun, by Joshua, the next 3 in the land itself were designated. And at that point, all 6 cities went into effect. And they would serve basically a dual purpose. On the one hand, they were protection for someone who inadvertently committed manslaughter. He would run to the city and he would be protected. He would be there and no one was allowed to touch him. He wasn't penalized. He certainly was not killed by the court. It was not a capital punishment because it was an accident. There's a concept of a goyel hadam, which basically is that the living relatives of the deceased, of the person that was killed, so the living relative or relatives have a right in this unique situation to, so to say, take the law into their own hands, but this is the law, this is the Jewish law, to kill the person who accidentally killed their relative. However, so long as the individual that committed the manslaughter is in one of these cities, they are not allowed to harm him. They cannot. Only if and when he steps foot out of the city, then he has allowed himself to be killed by one of these close relatives. Then he stays in there for a certain period of time till the high priest passes away, till the death of the high priest. So it could be one day, or it could be for the rest of the individual's life. All right, that's very briefly part of the Arei Miklat, the cities of refuge. Then the other reason, the other purpose of the cities of refuge is a form of kapara, of atonement. So it is sort of a punishment for the person that such a terrible thing happened through him, the accident of taking away another person's life. He's the one who actually killed someone else. Accidentally, but that's what happened. So therefore, he does need some type of atonement, and the atonement is exile. To go to this city and not to leave the city for a period of time, as mentioned, until the death of the high priest. All right, now the question is, who does it apply to? If a Jew kills whom? So, the Rambam rules as follows. Again, chapter 2, law 10. Echad hahoyreg es Yisrael, whether the person killed a Jew, oy hahoyreg evet Kenani, or if the Jew killed an Evet Kanani. And again, as we mentioned in many of the classes, Evet Kanani is a non-Jew that is owned by a Jew, and as we're about to see, as we mentioned in the previous classes, he was circumcised, not to be Jewish, but to be an Eved, to be a slave. And he was immersed in a mikvah, in the ritualarium. Again, similar to the process of conversion to become a Jew, but not to be a Jew, to become an Eved. And he accepted upon himself, formally, to keep the 7 mitzvahs. That would be an Evet Kenani. And again, Evet Kenani nowadays does not apply. We don't have avadim, we don't have slaves. But biblically speaking, that's what an Evet Kenani is. And even though we say Knaani, it applies to any non-Jew. It could be from any nation. It does not have to be from Canaan, or for that matter, for any of the 7 nations which occupied the Holy Land of Israel, which used to be the land of Canaan. Any nation, any non-Jew who goes through this process, who is acquired in one way or another by a Jew, becomes an Evet Kanani. So if a Jew accidentally killed a fellow Jew or killed an Evet Kanani, hareze neherag olav. So if the person did it on purpose, if he did it on purpose, and of course the witnesses and a warning, then the Jew would be put to death. So it's a capital offense for a Jew to kill a fellow Jew or to kill an Evet Kanani. Vim harag bishgaga goyle. And if the Jew accidentally killed the fellow Jew or the Evet Kanani, then he needs to be exiled to one of those cities of refuge. Yud Aleph, the next law 11. Barishaina, there's several different texts as to what the exact wording here, what the accurate print should be here in Maimonides. In the most common printed versions, it says here the word Barishaina, which means originally. However, in other accurate prints, it says, instead of Barishaina, it says Yisrael Shaharag. Ger Toshav. What happens if a Jew kills a Ger Toshav? Now again, to remind you, we've discussed this at great length. A Ger Toshav, as the Rambam says many times, or several times I should say, we do not have Ger Toshav when we don't have the Yovel, the Jubilee year. So again, Ger Toshav itself, in the legal, technical form, does not apply right now. There's no such thing as a Ger Toshav. However, what is a Ger Toshav biblically? So in the time that all the Jewish people live in the land of Eretz Yisrael, of Israel, and we have the Yovel, the Jubilee year, every 50th year in effect, so then, any given non-Jew who wishes to reside in Israel and formally accepts upon himself to keep the 7 Noachide commandments, that person receives the status of Ger Toshav, alien resident, or however you want to translate it accurately. And then, to a certain degree, he's part of the Jewish community. He's absolutely not Jewish. The Jewish people, though, have to treat him in many ways as part of the community. They're obligated to sustain him, to support him, and he has many rights. That is the Ger Toshav. So now, what happens if a Jew murders a Ger Toshav. The previous law spoke about a fellow Jew and an Evet Kanani. What happens now if the Jew murdered a Ger Toshav? Einoi neherag olav beveistin. So then the Jewish court would not kill the murderer, the Jew, for committing murder and killing a Ger Toshav. And the reason for this, Shenemar, for it states, we have an explicit verse in the book of Exodus, that when it comes to murder, it says, V'chi yazid ish al re'ehu. And if a man, referring to the Jew, will purposely, yazid, will do it intentionally, on re'ehu, that's the key word. Re'ehu, which is used often in the Torah and the verses, means his fellow Jew. His fellow Jew. To the exclusion of anyone who's not Jewish. Ve'ein tzarich loimar, and it goes without saying then, she'einei nerag al hagoy, that a Jew who murders a non-Jew surely does not get put to death for that. Because a Ger Toshav is much more than a regular non-Jew. Now obviously it's still a prohibition, and it's a terrible crime. It is a negative commandment of murder. It is forbidden for a Jew to kill anyone. And of course, one of the 7 mitzvahs b'nei noyach is no human being is allowed to kill anyone. However, we're talking about whether it's a capital offense for the Jew. Not only that, would the Beis Din, would the court actually kill the Jew for committing murder? So the answer is, if the Jew killed a goy, a non-Jew, he would not be put to death by the Jewish court. And even if it was a Ger Toshav, but if it was a Evet Knani, then the Jew would be put to death. Whether the person kills the Eved of others, getting back to what we said in the previous law, or whether it's his own, it's irrelevant. Don't think that a Jew would only be put to death if he purposely killed his own Eved. Doesn't matter. Even if he killed another Jew's Eved, as long as the person that was killed, that was murdered, is an Evet Kanani, the Jew is put to death for that crime. Now listen to this. This is really why I brought all this down. I would like you to listen very carefully, and this is going to give us a bit of insight to today's class. Says the Rambam that the Jew is killed for this crime. Sheha Eved, for this slave, the Evet Knani that we're talking about, Kibel olav mitzvos, accepted upon himself commandments, v'noisaf al nachalas Hashem, and he has been added to the inheritance of God. Meaning, the Evet Kanani, I think I had a slip of the tongue at the very beginning when I was describing the Evet Kanani. I may have accidentally said that he was circumcised, immersed in the mikveh, and took upon himself to keep the 7 laws. If I said that, that's a mistake. That's the Ger Toshav. I mean, forget the circumcision and the mikveh. Ger Toshav except the 7. The Evet Kanani takes upon himself to keep many biblical commandments, and he has to keep all the laws that a Jewish woman has to keep. So he's got a whole lot of mitzvahs, of commandments that he has to keep. Much more than the 7. He has to keep basically every mitzvah that a Jewish woman has to keep. Meaning, let's put it this way. He accepts upon himself, and he needs to keep all 613, except for the time-bound positive commandments that a Jewish woman is exempt from. All right. So that being the case, since he has accepted upon himself mitzvahs, commandments, and he has been added to Nachalas Hashem, therefore he is considered like a Jew. You're talking about an Evet Kenani, a non-Jewish slave owned by a Jew. He is considered, in many regards, such as in this case of being murdered, like a Jew. And therefore, if any Jew purposely, intentionally, murders an Evet Kanani belonging to anyone, the Jew would be put to death for that. Let's do the next one so we can get a bit of an idea of an Eved, but that was really the highlight. Yud Beis, number 12. Ma bein avdei leved acherim. What is the difference between, as far as these laws are concerned, the relationship between one's own Eved and the Eved, the slave of others? She'avdo yesh reshus la'koisei. One's own Eved, the master, the Jewish owner, has permission to strike him. He's allowed to hit him. Lefichach, therefore, im hiko ha'kasha yesh ba kedei lahamis, if the Jewish owner hit his Eved such a blow that was enough to kill, v'natalamus, and he was heading towards dying, and he survived for 24 hours from the time that he received the blow, and it was only more than 24 hours later that he actually died. Then the Jew who hit his Eved would not be killed, even though clearly this Eved died as a result of this Jew hitting him. So why wouldn't he be put to death for murder? Shenemar, because the verse states, Lo yukam ki chaspoihu, that, no, because he is his property, therefore he's not put to death in such a case. What does it mean when the verse says if he gets up and he survives for a day or two? Is it a day or two? We mean to say a day which is like 2 days, meaning 24 hours. That's the way that the Torah is transmitting to us the message of 24 hours. So if he survives for 24 hours and then he dies, his master is not put to death. Whereas someone else's Eved, he would be put to death. Because it's clear that the guy died because, as a result of the blow from this Jew, and this Jew has no right to hit someone else's Eved. One only has a right to strike his own Eved, not someone else's. So therefore, if the Jew hit him, and that blow was enough to kill, and he did die, I don't care if it was more than 24 hours later. And that's what he's saying now in number 13. But one who strikes an Eved which is not his own, even if he dies several days later as a result of the blow, since he hit him with such force that that blow was sufficient to kill, then the Jew is killed for hitting him just like any other regular free person. Because again, remember, when the Eved is freed, he then becomes totally Jewish. So remember that law. The Eved Kanani, as soon as he's freed, he's Jewish. So although the Eved Kanani is not a Jew, he's pretty close. And as far as many rules, such as this one, he's considered like a Jew. Now, I would like to share with you 2 more laws in the Rambam. Jumping to chapter 5, in the same laws, Reitzeyach Ushmiras Nefesh. Chapter 5, Halacha Gimel and Dalit, laws 3 and 4. In Gimel, Yisrael Shaharag Bishgaga, Eso Eved. Previously, we were speaking about premeditated murder, or, intentional. How about if a Jew accidentally killed an Eved? Oy es Ger Toshav, or a Ger Toshav. Goyle. Then the Jew is exiled to an Ir Miklat, to one of those cities of refuge. The Jew accidentally killed an Eved. And according to the text, the way we have it here, there's different opinions, different versions. Also, a Ger Toshav. The Jew goes to exile. And likewise, an Eved Kanani that accidentally killed a Jew. Or the Eved Kanani that accidentally killed the Ger Toshav. And likewise, Ger Toshav Shaharag es Ger Toshav. In the land of Israel, Two non-Jews that have a right to live there, they both have the status of Ger Toshav. One Ger Toshav accidentally killed another Ger Toshav. Oyasa Eved, Bishgaga. Or a Ger Toshav killed an Eved, accidentally. Goyle, in all of the above cases, he goes to Golus. Meaning to say that the cities of refuge were not only for a Jew who accidentally killed, but even a Ger Toshav who accidentally killed a Ger Toshav or an Eved. Shenemar, because when it speaks in the verse about this mitzvah of the cities of refuge, the verse states, Livnei Yisrael, for the sons of Israel, the children of Israel, Vilager, Vila Toshav B'Seicham, and for the Ger and for the Toshav amongst them. Dalet, number 4. Ger Toshav, Shehar Vages Yisrael Bishgaga. That's the one case we didn't talk about now. What happens if the Ger Toshav accidentally killed a Jew? Afal Pishu Shagag, although it was an accident, the same accident that the Jew would go to the city of refuge, the same accident that we just spoke about, the Ger Toshav killed a Ger Toshav, or the Ger Toshav killed an Eved, or an Eved killed a Yisrael, a Jew. All those cases, Golus, exile to the city of refuge. But what about this case? The Ger Toshav accidentally killed a Jew. Harei ze neherag, the Ger Toshav is put to death. Why? Because all of a sudden we apply the rule, Adam muad la'olam. A person is always responsible. That's a loose translation, but for this purpose we're going to say it like that. A human being is always responsible for what he does. And therefore, you can't tell me it was an accident. So all these cases of accidental manslaughter, where the person is not put to death, that's a special, unique exemption that the Torah makes, that the city of refuge would work. For the Ger Toshav that killed a Jew by accident, all of a sudden we become very strict and we say, you're a person, you're responsible, you're not an animal, and therefore you killed a Jew. I don't care if it was an accident, you have to be put to death. V'chein, and likewise, Ger Toshav, Shehara Ger Toshav, a Ger Toshav that killed another Ger Toshav, mipnei she'Allah al daite shemutar lahargai, because he thought that that's permitted. He didn't realize that he's not allowed to kill a Ger Toshav. He thought, I can't kill Jews, but why can't I kill another Ger Toshav? He's not Jewish. That's the mistake that the Ger Toshav made. He thought, well, if I get angry, can't I let it out by killing the other Ger Toshav who angered me? Harei ze karev lemezid. That's close to intentional. That mistake is considered almost intentional. V'nerag olav, and he's killed for that. Because his intention was to kill. He just thought that it was permissible. Sorry. How about this case? V'goy sheharages hagoy bishgaga. Remember, murder is one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei noyach. Not to kill, not to commit murder. So if a goy kills a goy purposely, it's a death penalty. He has transgressed one of the 7. What happens if it was bishgaga? It was by mistake, unintentional manslaughter. A goy killed a goy, not a Ger Toshav, not an Eved. A goy killed a goy by accident. The cities of refuge do not absorb him. He doesn't go there. They don't protect him. Shnemar, because the verse states, we just quoted, Livnei Yisrael. It's for the Jews. Or as the verse continued, Ger Toshav, but nothing about regular people. All right. So much for the laws of killing on purpose or by accident. I just wanted to show you how there definitely there are different stages, and the Eved Kanani is considered very much to be like a Jew. After that introduction, let us now proceed to the Beiur Halachah. We are in the Shulchan Aruch and the Code of Jewish Law, the first section called Orach Chaim, chapter 304 in the laws of Shabbos. And the Mechaber, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karbroi, in law number 3, states as follows. And again, here there are different versions as well, what exactly the wording is. Ein a Yehudi Gamur, an absolute complete goy, meaning a regular goy, not someone who's in the process or a little bit or a lot, a goy. Shehu sakir, that he is a hired worker by a Jew. He's hired by a Jew. He's not an eved. A non-Jew who's a hired worker for a Jew. Ein rabbi mitzuva al shvisosoi. His Jewish master is not commanded, is not obligated to see to it that he does not do any forbidden labor called milacha on Shabbos, on the Sabbath. All right. Let's see the Beiur Halachah on that. For those that are following inside, so this is in the Mishnah Berurah, that's where it's printed. There are all sorts of different, this is an older version, and I believe there's even translations in English that have come out recently, so you can find it. Again, it is Laws of Shabbos, 304, Beiur Halachah. And it's pretty much in the regular printed version, one entire column. What we're going to be doing is this column. Eina Yehudi Gomer v'chulu. All right, we just said that someone who is not Jewish. Kosav HaMogen Avraham. The Mogen Avraham, which is one of the primary commentators, running commentator, on this section of the Shulchan Aruch, he writes, Im kibel olav mitzvos hanoya goyis be'eved v'hu sakir. What about if this sakir that we're talking about, this hired worker, accepted upon himself the commandments that an eved has to keep? Which means you have over here a situation of an absolute non-Jew who took upon himself to keep many Jewish commandments. Basically all the commandments that a Jewish woman keeps. Nireli, says the Mogen Avraham, it seems to me, the ein rabbi mitzvah shvisasoi kishois la'atzmoi, that his master, the Jewish owner, is not obligated to see to it that he refrain from work when he does things for himself. And being that this is a quote from the Mogen Avraham, but the Beiur Halachah wants to explain and interject, so he put it in brackets. So we're now going to read the brackets, which are not actually the words of the Mogen Avraham, but it's the Beiur Halachah's explanation. Peirush, what this means to say is, that if this hired worker that took upon himself all the mitzvahs of an eved is doing milacha, Shabbos forbidden things, for another Jew, not for his owner, not for his employer, I should say, but for another Jew. Certainly that's forbidden. He's no worse than a regular Ger Toshav. So in other words, when the Mogen Avraham writes that his employer doesn't have to see to it to hold him back from doing melacha for himself, it means for himself and not for anyone else, not for the Jewish employer, but not for any other Jew. No, if it's for himself, then he can allow him to do it. Deloy his hira ha-Torah, because the Torah did not warn and did not give the prohibition, Ella al eved hakonui kinyan oilam, only for the eved, which is a real eved, which is acquired forever. The eved is property of the Jew forever. That type of an eved is where the Torah says that he cannot do malacha, and the Jewish owner, the Jewish master, needs to see to it that his eved does not break the Shabbos. And therefore the eved, he can't even do malacha for himself. Remember, he's got to do all the mitzvahs like women. Well, Jewish women can't do malacha. They have to keep Shabbos exactly as the Jewish men do. So does the Eved. For he has accepted upon himself the mitzvahs that the Jewish woman keeps. That includes Shabbos in its entirety, even for himself. And even in the privacy of his own room, that Eved Kanani is not permitted to light a fire for himself, by himself, in the privacy of his own room. Ad kan l'shoinoi, up to here is the end of the quote of the Magen Avraham. And now, the Beiur Halachah begins his discussion. V'tzarich iyun gadol. This, which we just read of the Magen Avraham, requires great understanding. We really need to delve into it deeply, and it's quite difficult. What's the problem? Kivan she'ein konui loy. This is not an Eved. This is a sakir. This is an employee. So he's not his property. So certainly there's no such thing as half a conversion. You're not a little bit Jewish. You're not halfway Jewish. Why in the world does it help? What does it apply? The fact that this hired worker accepted upon himself to keep all the mitzvahs like an Eved would in the days of the Avadim, like a Jewish slave. We've established clearly in the Talmud and Tractate B'choros, Eino Yehudi, that a non-Jew, should ba lekabil olav dvar Torah chutz midavar echad ein mekabel noisoi dinei Torah. If a non-Jew comes to the Jewish community, to the court, and he wants to accept upon himself the Torah, the words of the Torah, except for one thing, any one thing. I'm going to accept 612 out of the 613. We don't accept him. He is rejected. We tell him, go have a good day. Be a good Ben Noyach. Keep the 7. So no, I want to be Jewish. I want to keep everything, 99% of the command. No, it doesn't work like that. Vida, and you should know, Dimadi Sasham, that which it says over there, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu diktuk echad midivrei soifrim. Okay, this is parenthetical. That what it says over there, that even if it's one nuance of rabbinic law that he's rejecting, hainu, what that means is masha diktiku bebir ha'toira. It's not that he's rejecting something which is totally rabbinic, but he needs to reject something which is rabbinic on referring to and applying the biblical law. Similar to what it says in Tractate Sanhedrin, it gives the example of adding to the words of the rabbis, the rabbinic law, and it says if a person wants to add a 5th section to the phylacteries, to the tefillin have 4 sections. So if a person wants to add a 5th one, so that's considered transgressing, adding to the Torah. And there it says rabbinic, but tefillin is biblical. The 4 sections are biblical. But because in the Bible itself, in the written law, it doesn't specify the 4 sections, that's all part of the rabbinic tradition, we're calling it rabbinic. V'chein mashma v'rambam perek yudal milchas isurei bia shehetik k'Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda desvirlei deloi la'aflugei asa el levar v'ishmit b'lchosav tevas midivrei seifrim. All right, and then the Beiur Halachah says, and so it is implied as well from the Rambam, chapter 14 of the laws of forbidden relations, where he brings down these words from the Gemara, And the Rambam is interpreting these words that he's not coming to, that this opinion in the Talmud is not coming to argue. He's just coming to clarify, and therefore the Rambam actually omits the words midivrei soifrim from rabbinic, because that's kind of misleading. So basically what we're saying in these brackets are that the person is rejected not if he comes and he says that I don't want to accept something which is completely rabbinic. Even if he's coming to reject a rabbinic tradition on a biblical law, but it's got to be one of the 613. Then we don't accept him. Whereas if it's a Jewish custom or something of that nature, which is not biblical, and it's rabbinic in the sense of just it's a nice thing to do, but they're not saying this is what the Bible means, then that would be a different story. Then that person would not necessarily be rejected. But be that as it may, he's got to keep all of the biblical laws with all their details, with all the rabbinic tradition for the 613. So there's no such thing as being half a Jew. V'davka be'eved. It's only by an eved. That's the unique case. That's the exception, if you will. Shegufoi konui. That his physical body, his whole being and self, is owned by a Jew. He's not a 24/7 employee. He's owned. He's property of the Jew. V'yesh olav shem eved. And he has a status and a title of Eved. That's not just a title of a person who has a certain job. This person's a carpenter, this person's a painter, this person's a shoemaker. Eved is his status. Eved is his whole entity, from top to bottom, from head to toe, and everything in between, and his whole life. Like we said, he belongs to this Jew forever, unless the Jew frees him or something, or whatever, either by choice or by knocking out one of his, his tooth or his eye, whatever. So in such a unique case of an Eved, the Torah has revealed to us the Beish Kazeh, that in such a person, it is sufficient, if he fulfills just the mitzvahs that apply to the Jewish woman. That case, he then has a special status, and if you will, you can go ahead, but don't take it out of context, and call him a little bit Jewish, like we just saw from the laws of murder, of killing. So an Eved, you could say, is a little bit Jewish, but that's it. It's a very particular, specific case of an Eved Knani. Otherwise, there's no such thing. There's not a little bit. It either you are or you aren't. And if you're in the process, you still ain't Jewish. And if you're almost there, no. And if you did everything except for what you need to do at the final, then no. Only once it's complete. The Eved is different. Torah is telling us that an Eved is a different story. So the Beiur Halachah is asking, what does the Magen Avraham mean that this sakir, this employee, it took upon himself all the mitzvahs of an Eved? Well, what does that mean? That doesn't work. If you're not an Eved, you're not an Eved. Masha'enkin ba'adam ba'alma, which is not the case, exclusion of the Eved, a regular person from the world, any person. Ein lanu b'Torah. We don't have any other category of human beings. Rak, or Ger Toshav, or Yisrael Gamur. Biblically speaking, the person can either be a Ger Toshav or a Jew. That's it. Ger Toshav is a non-Jew who accepted formally to keep the 7 that he's got to keep anyway. Every human being that's not Jewish has to keep those 7. So he formally accepted to keep the 7, and he therefore has certain rights. He's not Jewish. He's part of the Jewish community. He's not Jewish. We support him. He's not Jewish. He has rights with certain conditions to live in the land of Israel. He's not Jewish. And even though normally we're not allowed to give any land of the Holy Land of Israel to a non-Jew, in this case, this person could. He's not Jewish. He's not a little bit Jewish. He's not kind of Jewish. He's not Jewish. So all we have is Ger Toshav and Jew. So if you have a person who didn't want to accept upon himself the entire Torah, he doesn't want to accept everything. Mistabra, then it makes sense logically. So what level should he be on? He should be like a regular Ger Toshav. Now again, nowadays there is no Eved and there is no Ger Toshav. But what status can we give this individual who is a sakir, that we surely can have nowadays? He is an employee working for his Jewish employer, and he accepts upon himself to keep a lot of mitzvahs. But he didn't accept everything, and therefore we don't accept him as a ger, as a convert. So therefore he could be like a Ger Toshav. And then the laws of Shabbos that apply between a Jew and a Ger Toshav should apply to him. But not like an Eved. So from where does the Magen Avraham get Sheyadif Meger Toshav? That this fellow, this employee who took upon himself to keep all the Eved commandments, should be considered legally better and more than a Ger Toshav. If you're not Jewish, it's forbidden to keep Shabbos. The Ger Toshav is not allowed to keep Shabbos. The Eved is obligated to keep Shabbos. The Eved must keep Shabbos. So here, it's not like, well, why not? Or let's be strict because he wants it. It doesn't work like that. So this employee who took upon himself all these mitzvahs, he didn't go through conversion, he didn't take upon himself all 613 with all their details. Therefore, how can he be more Shabbos observant and obligated than the Ger Toshav? Ger Toshav, it's not allowed to keep Shabbos, neither should this person. So what does the Magen Avraham mean? Where does he get this from? V'im kain, and if so, lefi zeh, according to this, you can have the following scenario. Yimatze ish, you can find a person sheyoytze michlal Ger Toshav b'harbe mitzvos yoyser kfi kabbalasoi, that he's gone out of the status of being a Ger Toshav because he's accepted many more. Ulichlal Yisrael loy ba, but he did not become a Jew because he didn't accept everything. The gam bichlal Eved eino, and he's not an Eved either. The only one that's more than Ger Toshav and not Jew is Eved, but this guy's not Eved either. Uminalezeh, where does the Magen Avraham come up with this? How can he say such a thing? I mean, we don't find, says the Beiur Halachah, that there is such an option, such a status. It's either Ger Toshav, Yisrael, or the one and only exception, a full-fledged, real Eved. So how can you have a person who's a sakir who accepted upon himself the mitzvahs of Eved and therefore should be like an Eved? How could that be? And then he references, the Beiur Halachah references another section in the Shulchan Aruch called Ger Toshav, chapter 124, in the explanation there of the Gra of the Vilna Goiner, Eliyahu of Vilna, who lived about 300 years ago. So what does he say there? He rules as follows. The ein molin oisay achikabel olav kol hamitzvos. You do not circumcise such a person until he accepts upon himself to keep all the commandments. So it's not a proper thing to circumcise a non-Jew or a Ger Toshav. The only time we find circumcision is for a Jew or for an Eved. if he's property of the Jew. And when we go back to the first, earliest place where we find circumcision, it is before the giving of the Torah, but it's written in the Torah, and this is where the commandment initially was given, of course, is to Avraham Avinu, Abraham. He was commanded to have himself circumcised and to circumcise all the males of his household, not just his sons, but his property as well, his avodim. Fine. And an Eved has to be circumcised, not for the sake of being Jewish, but for the sake of being an Eved. Otherwise, you're not supposed to circumcise. V'im kain, so if so, says back to the Beiur Halachah, Be'ish kazeh, such a person that we're discussing now, again, the sakir, the hired employee who took upon himself to keep all the commandments of an Eved, how was he circumcised before he took upon himself to keep all the commandments? He's not an Eved. So how did they circumcise him? He's just a sakir. A Jew is not supposed to circumcise his employees that are not Jewish. And if he wasn't circumcised, no, the Beiur Halachah is assuming he's not circumcised, because how and why would he have been circumcised? So without being circumcised and without immersing in the mikveh, Kaimalon, we've established, he's not included in the people of Israel at all. He's not a member, he's not a little bit Jewish, no such thing. Uminale, so from where does the Magen Avram get that he is obligated to keep the mitzvahs because he's so accepted? Where does he get that from? Why is he obligated to keep any mitzvah? There's no such thing. He does not have to keep the mitzvahs on the level that Jewish women do. And then he tells us to look up in the references in the Talmud tractate Yivamis. Right, that's actually the source of the laws of conversion. The Talmud there says that our forefathers, this is referring back to the time when the revelation at Sinai, when God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, that was when the Jewish people as a nation en masse went through conversion. So they entered the covenant of becoming, quote unquote, what we say today in our English terminology, Jewish, with Mila, circumcision, Utvila, and immersing in the mikvah, etc. And they had to have the acceptance of the commandments. V'loidai, and it is insufficient, that which they accepted upon themselves, mitchila, initially, lekayim kol ha-Torah, to fulfill the entire Torah. She'anu, for they had responded, they said, according to most, this was the day before God revealed himself and said the 10 Commandments at Sinai. The day before that, they said, Kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh v'nishma. Everything that Hashem said, we will do and we will hear. That is the key. Those words, that verse, is the acceptance of the fulfillment of the entire Torah par excellence. That's what they did. But that's not sufficient. The fact that they said that, and they meant it, that didn't make them Jewish yet. All right, so at this point, basically, if we would put in some punctuation and stuff, there would be several question marks and exclamation points, and very highlighted and very loud. The Beiur Halachah is, extremely disturbed, if you will, and he really says that he does not understand this Magen Avram. And now continues the Beiur Halachah. Achar kosvi kol zeh. After I wrote all of the above, hisboinanti, I meditated, I contemplated. Shef shelakayim dvarav. Actually, we could explain the Magen Avram. He's now coming to the defense of the Magen Avram that he just attacked. And he says, afterwards, I thought it over. And I think we could explain and make sense out of the words of the Magen Avram. The Sfira Leila Magen Avram, for the Magen Avram, he maintains, his opinion is, he holds Gamkein the Einoi Bar Yisrael Klal. He agrees with my statement that this sakir, this hired worker who accepted upon himself to keep all these commandments, he's not at all Jewish. He's not part of the Jewish people. He agrees with that. Uvichlal Ger Toshav, and therefore he's considered Ger Toshav. That's the category he would be in. And everything is like I said, true. The Magen Avram would say everything you said is absolutely correct. Ella the Sfirale, but here is the important underlying point, the redeeming point, so to say, of the Magen Avram, for the Magen Avram. That the Magen Avram holds the Ger Toshav Gufa, the Ger Toshav himself, Imratza lekabel olav, if he wants to accept upon himself, Be'ez tchilas gerusoi, at the time of the beginning of his gerus, and I'm going to say the word conversion, but I don't mean conversion to Judaism, he's Ger Toshav. So when he becomes the Ger Toshav, which there's no circumcision, there's no immersion in the mikveh, Ger Toshav means, in front of the Jewish court, he formally accepts upon himself what? So, the bottom line is the ruling in Jewish law is that he accepts upon himself to keep the seven mitzvot b'nei Noach. If at that time, when he is beginning the process of transforming himself from a regular goy to becoming a Ger Toshav, if he then accepted upon himself oid mitzvos milvad hasheva, more additional commandments, in addition to the seven, gam kein cholok kabbalosoi, then too it goes into effect, and he then is bound by keeping the mitzvahs that he accepted. Shemechuyev achar kach lekayim, afterwards he's obligated to keep them, whichever ones he took upon himself. He can pick and choose because he's not becoming Jewish. We don't have to reject him. He's becoming Ger Toshav. So it's like saying Ger Toshav means 7 or optionally 7 plus. Ella demad noktu sheva rebusa ashminyan. That which we're taught that he has to take upon himself these 7, and then he has the status of a Ger Toshav, that's coming to tell us the novelty over here. The point is that even though these 7, these are the basic ones. These are international commandments that every Ben Noach, any person who's a descendant of Noach, which is every human being on the face of the earth, is obligated to keep. Everyone has to keep them anyway. You were already commanded by God through Moses at Sinai. It's not optional. It's not, well, if you want to keep these 7, then nice, and then we'll accept you, and then you're Ger Toshav, and if not, not. Forget about the status in Ger Toshav. If you're a human being, you have the obligation to keep these 7. Umay ribusayu. So what's the Ger Toshav all about? What are we adding by his formal acceptance of what? Of keeping the 7 that he has to keep. Afilu hachi. So here comes the point. Nonetheless, chala kabbalah, his acceptance does go into effect, and it does have meaning, and it does change his status. Uvichlal Ger Toshav hu le'inyan shemitzuven lachayosoi. So now he falls into the category of being a Ger Toshav, and now the relationship of the Jewish community to him is different than had he not accepted it. Namely, that the Jewish people have an obligation to support him, just as they support their fellow Jews. If he would be a regular guy who keeps the 7, but didn't formally accept it and is not a Ger Toshav, then the Jewish community is not responsible to support him. It's between him and God. He's got to keep his 7. And as the Rambam rules, we have to promote the 7. We have to publicize the 7. We have to compel everybody to keep the 7. We have to campaign and teach. Fine. But do we need to take care of the person's finances? No. But if it's a time when you have a Ger Toshav, and the person became a Ger Toshav, then all of a sudden, we're responsible for him. But what really changed in his obligation? Nothing. He had to keep the 7, and now he has to keep the 7. That's the novelty of a Ger Toshav, that even though, minimally, a Ger Toshav is accepting upon himself that which he has to keep anyway. The kol shekain, and how much more so, im kibel olav yeser mitzvos. If the person who becomes a Ger Toshav took upon himself to keep more than the initial, original, basic 7 that everyone's got to keep anyway, bivadai, certainly, mahane, it works and it goes into effect. And of course he would have to keep those. Right? So the way the Beiur Halachah is explaining the intention of the Magen Avraham, that means that a Ger Toshav could take upon himself a whole bunch of mitzvahs, whatever category he wants, or he can pick and choose, as long as he keeps the 7. As long as he accepts upon himself the 7, then he can add, I like this mitzvah too, 8, 9, 10, 11, 600, whatever it may be. I mean, there may be certain exceptions that he's not allowed to, but otherwise, he can pick and choose, and he can say, I want this mitzvah, I want that mitzvah. And he says, of course that would work. The point that the 7 even changes his status, that's something which would be unusual or novel. But that more than the 7, that's understood. He's coming from being a regular guy to becoming more, not a little bit Jewish, but more obligations that he's taken upon himself. And the only difference is the Jews are obligated and commanded to keep 613. The rest of the world is obligated and commanded to keep the 7. And this person is voluntarily accepting it. Fine. But as soon as he accepted it formally, that's it. He voluntarily took upon himself an obligation. He's obligated himself voluntarily. I think that makes sense. V'loi tikshal zeh, says the Beiur Halachah, I don't want you. Don't ask as follows. The eich yishmer Shabbos. Wait a second. You gave me a nice explanation, and you told me you can take on extra mitzvahs. Fine. Let's say, for example, the Beiur Halachah didn't give any examples. I'm just giving an example now. This is not written here. Let's say he took upon himself that in addition to the prohibition of Eiver min Achai, one of the 7 Noachide commandments is you're not allowed to eat part of an animal that was removed or detached from the animal when the animal was still living. How about if the person takes upon himself, he wants to keep all the laws of kosher? What's kosher for a Jew? He says, I want to eat. If it's not kosher for a Jew, he doesn't want to eat. Which means all the animals which are tamei, he doesn't want to eat. That's it. He doesn't want to eat pork. I don't care if the pig was completely dead before this part of this meat was removed from it. I don't want to eat any of it. Or he says, I want to eat only meat of an animal that was slaughtered properly. Okay, that's fine. He can accept that upon himself. The dietary laws, he doesn't have to do that. He didn't have to do that. Nobody asked him to do it, but he voluntarily took that upon himself. Fine. Or another example. There's a prohibition in the Torah called sha'atnez. A Jew is not permitted to wear a garment that has a mixture of wool and linen in the same garment. It's only for the Jew. A non-Jew has no problem. A Ger Toshav is allowed to wear sha'atnez. An Evet can't, because it's a prohibition. It's a negative commandment. A Jewish woman can't. And this fellow comes along and he says, I want to keep the 7, and I know that the prohibition of sha'atnez does not apply to me. I want to take that upon myself. No problem. And once he took it upon himself, he is forbidden now to wear sha'atnez. It's not one of the 7, and it's not even remotely associated to one of the 7. Who cares? He took it upon himself. Fine. So you can make a long list of such mitzvahs. But Shabbos should be a problem. Shabbos? How can he keep Shabbos? A regular Ger Toshav, which is what we're trying to compare this sakir to, he is forbidden from keeping Shabbos. And he references a commentary called Tosfos to the tractate of Yevamos that states clearly that a Ger Toshav is forbidden from keeping Shabbos. So this whole discussion here that we started off, the whole Magen Avram, is based on this person, this sakir, the hired worker of the Jew, who took upon himself mitzvahs of an eved, and now the way that the Beiur Halachah is trying to explain that is that he is like a Ger Toshav who took upon himself to keep more. But Shabbos should not be allowed. A Ger Toshav can't keep Shabbos. Eved, yes! The verse says so clearly. When the verse lists who has to keep Shabbos, it says you, your son, your daughter, your Eved, your Shivcha, the male slave, the female, the maidservant. Not a Ger Toshav. So the reason why you shouldn't ask this question, the reason why it's not a problem, says the Beiur Halachah, Tizehu, for this is Bistam Ger Toshav. This Tosfos that we just are referencing, that's talking about the regular, run-of-the-mill Ger Toshav, the normal Ger Toshav. Shaloi kibel olav rak sheva mitzvos kanahug, that he just took upon himself to keep the 7. That's the normal Ger Toshav, not the unusual Ger Toshav. The regular Ger Toshav, who's taken upon himself formally to keep the 7 that everyone's got to keep anyway. That Ger Toshav is forbidden to keep Shabbos. V'im keinu linyan shar mitzvos keinu Yehudi gamur. Therefore, besides for these 7, the Ger Toshav is like an absolute non-Jew when it comes to all and any and every other mitzvah. He's not Jewish. He just has certain rights and a certain association with the Jewish community because he formally accepted to keep the 7. But as far as all the other mitzvahs are concerned, he is a non-Jew, as non-Jewish as even the person who doesn't keep the 7, or at least didn't accept them. But that's not the case. If initially, when he went through this conversion, or becoming a Ger Toshav, if then initially he accepted upon himself to keep more than the 7, more than the required minimal 7, if he then voluntarily took upon himself other mitzvahs, uvichlalam, and included in those mitzvahs, hayagam kin Shabbos. In his list that he gave, he told us, I want to keep the Jewish dietary laws. Okay, you're allowed to. You don't have to. You understand that. Absolutely. He knows he's got to keep the 7, and he's coming to the Jewish court. He's saying, I'm going to keep the 7, and here's the list. I got the 7, and plus. And he gives us a list of his plus. And in the list, he says, Shabbos. I want to keep Shabbos. Bevadai, certainly, Yochol L'kaimam. He can keep all the commandments that he took upon himself, including Shabbos. U'mechoyev L'kaimam. And then he's obligated to keep them. It's no longer a choice. He voluntarily accepted upon himself as an obligation. So it's not like, well, 1 week I want to keep Shabbos because that's what I told the Jewish court, and then the next week I changed my mind because something better came up. No. But I'm still going to keep the 7. No one asked you to take upon yourself more than 7. You voluntarily took upon yourself more than 7. Whatever you took upon yourself, you have to keep. And forgive me for using this expression, but so to say, you're stuck with. All right? And that could be Shabbos as well, if that was your initial acceptance. That which we referenced before, that the tractate B'choros says, the Eino Yehudi, that a non-Jew, a non-Jew wants to accept upon himself the entire Torah, except for even one thing. We don't accept him, we reject him. That's only with regards to let him convert and become an absolute Jew, that then we don't accept him. We reject him if he is omitting one single thing. But that doesn't mean that we reject him from becoming a Ger Toshav. a Ger Toshav, no problem. As a matter of fact, if someone says, I want to keep all 612, there's only one mitzvah I don't want to keep, that person could be a Ger Toshav, because Ger Toshav means the 7 plus. And if you take on everything, and it's a total of 613 and you omit nothing, well then you're not becoming a Ger Toshav, you're becoming a Ger Tzedek. You want to become Jewish then. And then, through the process, sure, we'd accept you. So if someone says, I want to keep the 7 plus, and he goes on and on and on and on, and he stands there, and he's listed 613 commandments with all their rabbinic detail. And then we ask him, sir, Mr. Ger, what exactly is it that you don't want to keep? He says, nothing. I want to embrace the entire Torah. So, welcome aboard. You're Jewish. You'll become Jewish now. We'll circumcise you, mikvah, accepting, what? Right? But if the guy says, I want to accept everything, except for one mitzvah, whatever it may be, so then, what does it mean we reject him? We reject him from becoming a Yisrael, a Jew. But he becomes a Ger Toshav who's obligated to keep not just the 7, but all 612. And therefore, that's the meaning of the Magen Avraham, and therefore there could be such a situation of a sakir, an employee, a Jewish employee, a Jewish employer who has a non-Jewish employee. And that guy took upon himself to keep all the mitzvahs of the Eved, which means Shabbos is included, because he's like a Jewish woman. And then his observance of Shabbos is much more than the basic Ger Toshav. He's like a Ger Toshav that took upon himself to keep Shabbos when he became a Ger Toshav. Uktsas smach, and a little bit of support for this approach. Matzasi l'divrei Magen Avraham. Says the Beiur Halachah, I actually found some support for this Magen Avraham, the way that I just explained it. From that which it says in the tractate of Avodah Zarah, in the Talmud, Eizel Ger Toshav, what is considered a Ger Toshav? That's where the Gemara discusses it. And the Gemara says as follows, the Chachamim oimrim, the Chachamim, that's the majority opinion of the sages of the Talmud, they say, Kol shekibel olav sheva mitzvos bnei Noach. Anyone who accepted upon himself to keep the 7. That is the definition of Ger Toshav. He formally, in front of a Jewish Beis Din, the Jewish court, accepted upon himself to keep the 7. V'acherim oimrim, and others say, Kol shekibel olav kol hamitzvos chutz me'isur nevelos. The other opinion, this is not the way that we rule la halacha, this is not the way that we actually give the ruling, but this is an opinion that states in the Talmud. The definition of a Ger Toshav is someone who takes upon himself to keep everything with the exception of nevela, non-kosher meat, basically. That he wants to continue to eat. So he wants to convert, but not to Judaism, because then he wouldn't be able to eat this meat. So he says, I'll take upon myself everything except for the prohibition of eating nevela. And then the verse, of course, says that we give the nevela to the ger. In the Torah, it says, what are you supposed to do with the nevela meat? So it says, give it to the ger. Now, over there, it can't mean ger as in convert, as ger tzedek, because he's Jewish. He can't eat nevela. A ger is just as Jewish as any Jew. So that verse obviously means ger toshav. So the nevela you give to the ger toshav, which means everything else, ger toshav is like a Jew. So even though that's not the opinion that we follow, but the fact that there is such an opinion, alma, so we see, says the Beiur Halachah, that according to this opinion, surely his acceptance of taking upon himself all the mitzvahs, except any one thing, does go into effect and becomes obligatory. And Shabbos would be included as well. And now he says parenthetically, And nonetheless, Einenu Bichlal Yisrael, he's not included in the Jewish people. Kivan Shashir Davar Echad, because he left out one thing, any one thing, whatever it may be, Nevela. And as we mentioned above. Vehu Hadin, and the same thing applies, the Lachachamim, according to the first opinion, which is what we follow, that the definition of Ger Toshav is that he formally accepted the 7. They too agree, in Kibel, if he accepted upon himself something, in addition to the 7, Chala Kabbalah, then that acceptance goes into effect and becomes obligatory. We have a rule across the board. For those that study Talmud, I'm not saying that non-Jews are permitted to study Talmud. For those that study Talmud, one will see, that there are so many disputes and arguments in the back and forth and give and take. But we have an interesting rule, believe it or not. Wherever we're able to minimize the argument or to give some explanation and show how these two opposing opinions are in fact not really arguing, we prefer to do that. Or we prefer to minimize the extremity of the arguments. So to here, why should we say, we clearly have an argument over here in the definition of Ger Toshav. Chachamim say he accepts the 7, and the Acherim, the others, say he accepts everything except for Nevela. But let's not say, this is what he's suggesting, let's not say that the Chachamim say that the only definition of Ger Toshav is exclusively keep accepting the 7. Let's say that they agree that he can take on more and keep more, and that would become obligatory as a Ger Toshav, even according to them. And now he concludes with the words, Zehu hanire lanius taiti b'yishuv dvarav. This, says the Beiur Halachah, is what appears to me, and he's using a very common expression in rabbinic literature, that which appears to me to the impoverished or the poorness of my mind. It's a humbling statement in explaining his opinion. So after he really attacked and questioned the Magen Avraham very strongly, he then says, I thought about it, and I came up with the following explanation. Now, what would that mean practically? So, very briefly, there could be two approaches to this nowadays in a practical way. One, so to say, more liberal and one more conservative, if I could use those terms. One person can say, one can make the argument that nowadays a goy, a non-Jew, who is not becoming a ger, not becoming a Jew, who must keep all 7, has the right to accept upon himself as many mitzvahs as he wants, up to all of them, not including all of them. And then that would be obligatory. And then he would actually be able and have to keep all of those commandments. And then the Jew wouldn't be able to use them, for example, there's a term called a Shabbos Goy, because this guy took upon himself to keep Shabbos, and he would be allowed to, just like the Ger Toshav could. And that's the Magen Avraham's sakir, employee. He's just an employee. Or alternatively, the argument would be, that's only when you have Ger Toshav. You need to have a real Ger Toshav, which we clearly do not have nowadays, as we mentioned many times at the beginning of today's class as well. Only when all the Jews live in the land of Israel and the Yovel, the Jubilee year, is in effect, which it isn't. So if you don't have a Ger Toshav proper, and there's no such thing as the non-Jew formally accepting the 7 in front of a Jewish court, then he can't accept upon himself to do any more than those 7. And therefore, even if one would make the argument that he could keep some of the mitzvahs, but he surely can't make them obligatory to the extent that, let's say, Shabbos. No, he has no rights to keep the Shabbos. So those are the 2 ways of looking at it. And just to mention, though, of course, the Magen Avram wrote this in the time of exile. It was just a couple hundred years ago. The Magen Avram wrote this clearly when there is no Ger Toshav proper. And the author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber, also some 500 years ago, in times of exile, and he's the one who wrote that his Jewish owner does not need to see to it that his sakir keeps Shabbos. And that's where the Magen Avram stepped in and said what he did. So that would be pretty much the 2 approaches. And sort of putting all that aside, what I would like to emphasize is, first and foremost, certainly, is the observance of the 7, which include many other things, as we've discussed in earlier classes. And it's not just the 7, but there are other things which are branches and associated with and part of extensions of these 7. And without explaining again, but just to throw out a few things, even though they don't seem to be in the list of the 7, tzedakah, charity, chinuch, education, kibud avaim, honoring parents. Those are just a few. So, and of course, prayer, tefillah, to pray to God and to no other entity. So really, I would strongly urge the Bnei Noach world to focus on keeping these 7, on becoming more godly, focusing on serving and worshiping and praying to God and God alone, and to build your connection by being good, just, honorable people according to the Torah for the sake of heaven. And I would personally discourage people from trying to keep some of the commandments, some of the Jewish mitzvahs. I would say it's not necessary. Not saying it's forbidden. I'm just stating my feeling, my approach, my understanding is that the 7 are what really should be promoted. And through these 7, the nations of the world are keeping God's plan and making this world more godly and enabling the Jewish people to make this world the dwelling place for God, which we all have a part of. And until next time, wishing everyone well, and may we merit to have the coming and the complete revelation of our righteous Mashiach now. Thank you.